ん、こんにちは。いかがお過ごしていらっしゃいますか？今、ピラミッドの下の発見が、大きく、ソーシャルメディアでセンセーションを起こしていますけど、やはりエジプトといえば、エレナ・ダナーンさんがエジプトのフィールド考古学者で、もうエジプトに大変詳しい方。なので、トレボー・グラッシーさんがエレナさんからのインタビューを受けている動画が、昨日かな、出てましたので、その一部ご紹介したいと思います。
Hi everyone, I have today a friend of mine who is Trevor Grassi, an independent researcher in Egyptology. Trevor, welcome. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much. It's been a long time waiting to do this. I'm really excited to talk with you finally. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, we were planning to do that for a while and then things happened. And oh my gosh, you were so busy. So before getting into the busy part, I'd like to you to explain to my audience what motivated you in your life to become independent researcher in Egyptology. What inspired you? What is your journey to this point today?
I guess it starts when I was about 18 and I had a lot of philosophical questions. I was getting into philosophy and stuff, thinking about the world, what's wrong with it, that kind of thing. But basically when I was 18, I ended up meeting John Anthony West, who was, he was the man who completely rewrote history, basically, and the origins of civilization. Sorry, one thing. So, I was graduating high school and all my guidance counselors and stuff were telling me I have to go, do something reasonable. And I basically met him and I realized his official title was a rogue Egyptologist. And that really resonated with me, that title when I'm being told I should go, do something normal. Something clicked and I ended up becoming very close with John and his whole family for the following 12 years until he passed in 2018. So, it's hard to quickly summarize who he was or what he did, but he was, basically gave us this entire understanding that the Sphinx is way older than we thought based on water weathering and bringing in Dr. Robert Schoch. And basically his book Serpent in the Sky, it goes very deep into the deep levels of esoteric symbolism. So I kind of describe it like it's the foundation you need to start studying Egyptology. And basically, from there, I ended up just realizing he was a genius. And I was like, I want to learn everything I can from you. I was asking him questions. I was in his library for like 12 years straight. I realized he had something that no one else had. So that really gave me the first impulse into it. But it was also in the early 90s, they discovered when they were looking at the water weathering on the Sphinx, the subsurface weathering and doing seismic surveys, they discovered this chamber under the Sphinx's left paw, which, it led me back then. I didn't know about Edgar Cayce and all this back in 2006. So, I ended up learning about all that stuff very quickly because Edgar Cayce, who I know you're familiar with and probably your audience is, was an amazing psychic, gifted, very accurate, very verified and validated. And he's talking about this age of a golden age in the distant past where this cataclysm that happened to Atlantis, it ended up wiping out this advanced civilization and they buried all their secret knowledge under Giza, basically. And he said specifically that there's a chamber under the Sphinx's paws that leads to this hall of knowledge and records. So that's where it really all started for me. I realized this wasn't a hoax. This wasn't a myth. This wasn't just made up. I started researching. I realized this archive under Giza is really a real thing. So from there, I ended up meeting all these people through John, Graham Hancock, Robert Schoch, Laird Scranton. He inspired all these people, Robert Bauval, Thomas Brophy, a whole host of people that I might just show in a second, a couple books that I could share some of the things that furthered me along that path. Or I could show a couple of them right now, even might be easy.
Yes, please do.
Okay. I just got a random stack here, but this one's called the Origin Map. This one is completely mind-blowing. This shows a megalithic site. It's an astrophysicist, Dr. Thomas Brophy. He's showing a megalithic site in southern Egypt. And if you see these two different pictures, this is showing two different alignments to the stars in the precessional cycle that happened 13,000 years apart, basically. When this lines up, this one's not going to line up for 13,000 years. And one of them hasn't aligned since 16,500 BC. So this is the kind of thing that throws a monkey wrench in the whole timeline. And John wrote the afterword, and Robert Schoch wrote the foreword. There's some newer ones too, but classic is Dr. Schoch, Voyages of the Pyramid Builders, and then this one as well, Origins of the Sphinx. This is some of the stuff. Schoch started defending this entire hypothesis of the erosion on the Sphinx, proving that it was far older, which I'm not going to get too deep into, but people can also see that I did some interviews with Danny Henderson, and covered a lot of that material there. If people want to look at the opening the Hall of Records, it has a lot of that information. And then there's a few Lost Star of Myth and Time. This is one that gets into the precessional cycle, which is some of this most advanced knowledge that was encoded into these myths and art and architecture of a lot of the most advanced civilizations that seem to have this knowledge from the prehistory, from Atlantis. This is another one about that, Earth Under Fire, Paul Violette. I'll just throw all these up quick so people can look them up later. Or the Atlantis Blueprint. This is Colin Wilson and Rand Flemeth. Another one about Earth changes and this idea that some cataclysm really wiped a bunch of that out. And this is another, on that subject, Maps of the Ancient Sea Kings by Charles Hapgood. So this is a handful of them. I've got a few other books here. Maybe I'll show later on too, because they're related. But that's a couple examples of some of the people that John started turning me on to that were, it was like when I could ask him questions about this, I'd be like, John, what's the best book about 2012 or something? In 2008, around then, I was asking him that. And for instance, he sent me to this book called Maya Cosmogenesis 2012 from John Major Jenkins, who's also passed a few years ago. But I got to correspond with him a little bit. He was absolutely the guy who knew more than anyone else on the subject. So with one question, I'm sent to the best book on the topic. I'm sent to the best researcher to answer these questions. So it was like John was cutting me through this sea of just nonsense that would have taken me lifetimes to read all this stuff and find the actual real people that were challenging the whole theory of the whole narrative of the timeline of the origin of civilizations, which is still being pushed basically through academics, and any alternative to it has really been sidelined and censored, and it's faced a lot of opposition, like John did when they found this chamber that Edgar Cayce predicted, and then they weren't able to do more work there or actually get down into that chamber. So much like Schoch and John, I wanted to see what's in that chamber under the Sphinx's front paws for quite some time. And, if you do the math, that's 2006. I'm 37 now. This is over half my life. I've been looking for the Hall of Records, basically. So in the past couple of years, everything has just started to really heat up on that, because as far as your book, The Cedars, coming out, that was a big one. My friend Manu Safes today, he recently released a book a few years ago. It's called Under the Sphinx. That is a critically important book. So some of this stuff is suddenly coming forward now that's making my past 20 years of working on this suddenly very relevant. And in the past 2 weeks, especially, as we can get into towards the end, my friends in Italy have just released some pretty amazing discoveries under the pyramids. So that's a hot topic, highly debated, contested, controversial. Maybe I can answer some questions about that today as well. I would say just on that quick is that I basically confirmed with Armando May recently that he's willing to do an interview with me on the 12th in English. And they have not given any English interviews at all so far. They've been trying to respond to questions in Italian because they're more comfortable in that language. But he basically said he'd like to get questions sent to him ahead of time so he can look at them and be able to respond, accurately and make sure he's saying the right things. But it sounds like they're going to let me record an interview with maybe even with Filippo, who's the guy who innovated this new synthetic aperture radar Doppler tomography technology, which is what has allowed them to actually scan under the pyramids now, and what people have a lot of questions about because it's a new innovation on something that's been around for a while, but this is what's allowing us to now see slices of the Giza Plateau that go 2 kilometers deep, which is far beyond anything we've had as far as technology, non-invasive. It's a real breakthrough. So things are now heating up after the past 2 decades of working up to this. So yeah, it's
and
very
before we are coming to this very specific research from the Italian team, and you didn't only study through books. You went to Egypt. You even went there many times. When was the first time you went to Giza? And what was your feeling? What did you feel? What was in your consciousness at that moment when you stepped on that plateau?
It took me a long time because it's not cheap. And the first time I went, I wanted to go on a tour. I wanted to go with John. He had what was called the Magical Egypt Tours, which were, without a doubt, number one, the top tour anyone on earth wanted to get on because he was the master. Everyone knew, nobody knew Egypt better than John. So they were very coveted trips, but, I didn't have a lot of money. I was trying every single year to save up enough to get on one of those tours. But I was traveling, I was a musician, an artist, and just, certainly not the kind of person who had some money like that sitting around. And to do a full two-week tour of Egypt and really see everything, it's like a minimum price of $6,000 or something plus airfare to Cairo and back, and it's not easy to get that kind of money together. So it took me a long time, and sadly, but also fortunately in another way, the moment when I finally got enough money to go, John died that year, and that was 2018. He got sick for that year and just missed it basically. And at his memorial that they held at his family's property, that was when I first met Dr. Shock. And because, John couldn't give tours anymore, Shock kind of stepped up and said, all right, everyone who missed that opportunity, you can come with me this year. And so he did a tour in 2019 that sold out immediately. So he did a second one immediately after it, and that sold out immediately. And then he doubled the capacity of the second trip, and that sold out immediately. And someone canceled on that one, and I ended up getting the last seat to go with Dr. Shock. So this was 2019, and that was the first time I got to go to Egypt. It was with Dr. Robert Shock, his wife, Catherine Ulysses, who also helped him with rewriting and revising one of his most important books, Forgotten Civilization. And it was with a team called Oracle, which is it's kind of a partial anagram of, or a acronym of Organization for the Research of Ancient Cultures. And so there's a couple other people that were in this organization that was kind of based on what he and John had been working on before. And Shock has since set up this entire branch of Boston University where he's a professor, and he's now the director of the Institute for the Study of Ancient Cultures or something like that, ISOC, I think. So he's basically the only one who's really pulling this whole idea of an ancestral civilization, leaving a legacy behind for these other cultures, into the realm of academia itself and actually getting it, which is the fight that's been going on this whole time. There's been a firewall here where the academics, or John called them the quackademics, not all of them, you know, he recognized there were great people, but there are some that are just ferociously attacking any kind of Graham Hancockian alternative view of history whatsoever. And so I've called it the war for archaeology, or the archaeology wars, because, it's like a firewall. It's like these alternative researchers, everyone wants to see their peer-reviewed papers, but nobody in the academies will allow those papers to be peer-reviewed. So it's like a chicken and egg, like, when are you guys going to wake up and let us prove to the academics and let them actually study this stuff that's very obviously proving, you know, that they're still telling us, you know, these cultures on the Eastern Hemisphere and Western Hemisphere, they both just came up with this idea for pyramids themselves. They both just came up with this idea for, like, you know, manipulating the density of stones somehow to turn them into marshmallows and squeeze them against each other like corn kernels. And this technology that's very clearly advanced in a way where our own technology of today is barely caught up. And all of these, you know, esoteric symbols that ended up turning into these hieroglyphic writing systems, both sides of the world, and they're still telling us no one crossed the ocean until Columbus. And it's like, come on, at this point, stop with that. It's just so ridiculous. But they're still not allowing any kind of, you know, you don't have to call it Atlantis. They hate Atlantis. John would call it the A word. You know, it's like saying a profanity or something. If you're talking to academics, they're going to turn right off if you mention Atlantis or aliens or, you know, anything extraterrestrial. So there's just been this blockage. And I think at this point, a lot of people are seeing that these alternative researchers have really come up with a lot of holes in this timeline that's being pushed by the mainstream narrative that needs to be corrected. And history and civilization, as we know it, did not begin 5,000 years ago. As you've talked about it as well in the Cedars, when you get into the Anunnaki and the King's List and stuff, we're talking about much larger periods of time. And even in the scientific world, they're talking about 200 to even 300,000 years. Humans haven't physiologically changed at all. So we've been the same for 300,000 years. Our brains haven't increased, but we just never thought to start a civilization until 5,000 years ago. It doesn't make sense.
No, it doesn't.
So, all these flaws in the official story are coming forward to a point where it's like people like Graham Hancock now have to go to Netflix to present his information, and then he's got the Society of American Archaeologists devoting like half their yearly publication to warning their students how dangerous it is to even read Graham Hancock. And it's like, when are we going to grow up? When can we just talk about this? When can this be in the universities? Because it's obvious we were wrong about it. You know, the mainstream view of it was wrong.
Yeah, but we all know now, because people start to wake up, who owns the mainstream media and the academia.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, who is behind controlling the information, controlling exactly what they're going to serve to people, to maintain people in a state of ignorance. But now, as the world awakens, and independent researchers like you, like many others, are just pushing it forward and using alternative media, and it's happening. That's the only way we can get around this.
Yeah, and I guess I kind of went on a tangent there. You were asking what it was like when I first got there.
Yeah.
I'll answer that now. It was like, when I mean, these were the best 2 weeks of my life. Getting to spend 2 weeks with
T411 の情報が出てきています。総監エレディオンが銀河連合の私のコンタクト先が最近言ってました。古代アークがありますけど、日本の他にあるんでしょうか。美代子さんね、32か34世界中にアークがあります。それぞれ違った文明のアーク。ソーハンが言いました。なんで受諾したかっていうとですね、日本でディスクロージャーが必要だからと。本当ですか？なんで日本でディスクロージャーがそんな必要なんですか？というのがね、日本人はもっとね、何が起きてるか知るべきだからとソーハンが言ってました。日本でね、体内に入れられるので、みんな目覚めてる人の間でものすごい大騒ぎになって心配してるんですけど、どうでしょうかね。美代子さんも間違いなく2025年をお祝いできますよ。